Chair, we're now live.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Wayne Bridges and I am Chairman of this meeting. Key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee will be using tablets and laptops to view the agendas today. Some quick housekeeping rules before we proceed. We are not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one does sound, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices or place them on silent before the meeting starts. We also have residents' feedback forms available in the room and underneath the broadcast on the YouTube channel. We move on now to apologies for absence, please.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indications, which brings us on to item 3, to receive the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 8. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in part 1. There will be no part 2 items to be considered. Before we move on to the main agenda, I'll be making some adjustments to tonight's format. I will be taking item 7 of the abandoned vehicles, pages 33 to 40, as our first item, and then we'll proceed as normal as per the agenda items. So we'll begin with that item. Joanne, good evening and welcome. There will be no presentation from yourself in line with the rules of this committee, so we will go straight to questions from members, please. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joanne. I noticed in the report it said that only 3 fixed penalty notices were issued in nearly a year. I was just wondering, does that reflect enforcement challenges or resource limitations?
That does reflect enforcement challenges in terms of evidence, collating evidence and issuing fixed penalties.
Councillor Gohill, your supplementary.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if that if those limitations were, how much of those limitations were as a result of DVLA delays.
Yeah, that wouldn't cause any problems in terms of enforcement. DVLA delays. The DVLA is checked regularly, at least every 2 to 3 days.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Just leading on from Councillor Gohill's question, the answer you gave there was the one I expected. How do we benchmark against other neighbouring authorities or similar authorities in terms of enforcement, in terms of results? Are other authorities facing similar challenges?
I understand they are facing similar challenges, but I haven't any benchmarking figures related to other authorities at this time, Councillor.
Councillor Smallwood.
I can understand it, not necessarily the most interesting thing to benchmark on this committee. Could we maybe have a takeaway that we do go and maybe have a look at benchmarking again, or even just getting maybe some good practice or some challenges that councils have faced, or if we are just, it is one of the, I can understand why it is probably, if someone's abandoned a car, finding them, I get the challenges, I can see it in my head. But could we maybe go away and have a little look at benchmarking against authorities and seeing if there's any good practice or challenges that other neighbouring authorities have faced to maybe learn good lessons and maybe next year be able to enforce more?
Thank you very much. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. It says that in terms of public reporting tools and visual indicators, it's based on data with DVLA and police, and the intelligence-led operations and mapping hotspot areas, Hillingdon does not utilize or have integrated access to ANPR with this capacity. If Hillingdon does not utilize the ANPR capacity, why not? If it's not integrated access to ANPR, what are the challenges? Thank you.
The ANPR facility is not integrated with Hillingdon systems. There are obvious challenges in terms of data protection, monitoring vehicle registration numbers. That's a difficulty for us at this time.
Councillor Cole.
Yeah, you did not answer. If it does not utilize, it says, however, Hillingdon does not utilize access to NPR. Then if it does not utilize, why not? Thank you.
We have to request access to the ANPR and we have justified reasons for accessing the ANPR to obtain those details. and that would record the movements of a vehicle and registration details of a vehicle around the borough. Abandoned vehicles, we wouldn't utilise that for investigating abandoned vehicles because they're left in one spot, they're stationary. The ANPR logs vehicles that move around the borough and where they're registered.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, Chairman. What percentage of abandoned vehicles do we cover the cost for, so when they're removed?
The majority of the cost is covered by the West London Waste Authority. We operate a contract with them and removal contractors that operate on behalf of Hillingdon Council plus other boroughs across Greater London. So we obviously employ them as a contractor for us. That's correct.
Yeah. So what's the sort of cost that we're absorbing off of that? Do we manage to get any money back from the vehicle owners?
Apologies. The cost of storage and collection, if vehicle owners come forward, that they bear the cost of the storage and the removal. So the removal contractors will pass that on to them and recover from them directly and not affect the council. It's the vehicles that aren't recovered, that are recovered but not collected by the registered keepers that we will be responsible for storage and destruction costs for.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report. I'm curious, we've also got an issue here in terms of how you define what an abandoned vehicle is, and some of the processes with this. One of the things I was curious about was with regards to what kind of patrolling is being done, because I walked around and you can see vehicles with there's weeds growing out from underneath the vehicles and things like this. Now clearly that vehicle hasn't moved in a long time, and I have reported them on those instances. Is that kind of patrolling being done across the borough? Again, about capacity, I realise, but is that sort of thing being looked at? And also with the fact that some vehicles may be being stolen, is there any optional capacity where the police are sharing recently locally stolen vehicles in the area with the council that might help them in identifying these vehicles actually are truly abandoned because someone's nicked it and left it somewhere?
Thank you, Councillor. In the last 6 months we've had 351 cases assigned to officers, and out of those 350 cases we've conducted 236 site visits where officers have gone out to inspect the vehicles, take photographs, make the necessary investigations and inquiries they need to. In terms of the police, we do work with one of the local policing teams who are responsible for stolen motor vehicles, and we are regularly contacted. So when we do have a vehicle come up, I will forward the details. They will check to see if it's stolen. If it is, they will go and do what they need to do in terms of police work on the stolen vehicles, and we won't collect it or remove it.
Okay. Councillor Farley, do you wish to have a follow-up?
Thank you, Chair. I was just thinking about in terms of proactive rather than turning it back around on the other way. I'm also page is it on? Page 23 of the report, of the agenda pack. So item 9, it talks about the legal difficulties. So notice is given if it's on private land, and if the landowner says no, you can't remove this within the 15-day period, it then says if the landowner objects that the local authority cannot proceed with removal. Is that within the 15 days, or after the 15 days expires then they can? I'm only curious because I have had an instance where the vehicle's on private land and there are rats and things living in it because it's an environmental hazard. So I'd like some clarity on that, if I can, please.
No problem, Councillor. If they do not come back to us within the 15 days, we can remove it, and we will.
Okay. I think you may want to have another question. You can wait till we go round again. I'll go to the next members. So we're going to members who've already asked questions before. Councillor Garlick, no, you've not asked a question yet. Do you wish to ask one before I go round to other members? Okay. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, how much, on average, what do you know the average officer time spent investigating a single suspected abandoned vehicle case? Or do you have a cost per case figure?
It would be difficult without obviously doing time and motion to see how much time is spent on investigating abandoned vehicles. But if you think the report comes in, we then go out, do a site visit, take photographs, come back, do a DVLA check, then we would write to the registered keeper giving them 7 days to remove. If they don't, then we would need to go back, redo a site visit, then get in touch with the vehicle contractors to come and remove. And there may be issues with removal objections at the time, so then an officer would need to go out again. So those are the kind of inquiries that we need to do when investigating an abandoned vehicle.
Councillor Gohill? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to follow up. So whilst we as Joe said, we've had 351 cases assigned, we've actually had over 600 cases misdirected, but they still need to be triaged by our kind of front door team. So we have had very, very high volumes of assumed abandoned vehicles that have been reported by residents or members, and then they turn out not to meet the definition. Either they are taxed or they do have an MOT. But they still have all those service requests still have to be handled by our triage team, and then they read out all the misdirected cases, and then that's how we're left with the 351. But yes, it's a very resource intensive process just because of the sheer volumes of misdirected cases.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. And separate to that, but sort of related, I know a big issue in my ward is suspected abandoned vehicles as a result of people parking and then going to Heathrow. I was wondering if you've got any data related to travellers going or coming back, travellers going to Heathrow and or coming back, or if there's anything you can give us in that kind of vicinity to see, to help us just define how much of the scope of how much of a problem this might be.
That particular issue does span a number of my services in terms of the sort of road meet and greet or airport parking. In terms of how it fits in with our abandoned vehicles process, this would be an example of one of those cases that would be screened out or by our triage service, because if it kind of falls within the nuisance parking category, so that wouldn't be processed as an abandoned vehicle. And at the moment we're not collecting data, and we wouldn't necessarily know whether they were a holiday traveller or whether it was just nuisance parking. So we have no mechanism to collect that level of data at the current time.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to the abandoned vehicles, what percentage of cars are not collected?
Sorry, I've just had to get the right screen up. So over the last 6 months, we've removed 87 vehicles, and of those, only 2 were claimed by the registered keeper, and we've destroyed 57. What's the no further action one, Joe? I'm not sure on that one. Not sure. So yeah, it's a very, very low number of people that actually come back to claim the vehicle.
So one second.
Okay. Davis, supplementary.
Yes, sorry. That's quite shocking, considering that most of that cost is going to have to be absorbed by us. But I'll change the question slightly. Have you seen an increase since the Mayor of London introduced ULEVs? Did you see an increase in abandoned vehicles, or do we have that data that could be made available to the committee? Because I'd be intrigued to see. I know for a fact in my ward there was a number of cars that people couldn't afford to drive, and they just got left. So I'd like to know if there was a surge.
We don't have that data at the moment. However, I believe we can get it. So that's something I'd be happy to provide you after this meeting. Is the kind of before and after?
Yeah, of course.
Dates for that. So yeah, we should be able to provide that for you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Can that be recorded in the minutes, that data? That'd be helpful. I just wanted to understand how we try and do proactive comms with people that may have left a vehicle in, just like directing them about where they may be able to send their abandoned vehicle or find somebody that may be able to come and collect it. It may be a language barrier or just not knowing I wouldn't know, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, I don't own a car, so probably the reason. But still, I think they're still there. Do we do any proactive comms in trying to get hold of people if we can, to go, look, this is where you can get your vehicle connected up, or are we doing any particular, with the police here, they have like surrender your guns and knife days. Do we have like surrender your car day? I mean, probably you can't if it's abandoned, but you get my point.
I think the short answer is no, we don't. But there have been various government scrappage initiatives, sort of on a more, national, kind of London-wide level. I don't believe we run anything like that as a council. No.
Councillor Small, do you wish to have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Core?
Thank you, Chair. It also mentions that HGV trailers are also part of the abandoned vehicles thing. Have we, like for example in Springfield Road and other industrial areas, there have been issues and issues of those kind of trailers left. What kind of success have we had with taking them away, or how big is that nuisance around the borough? Thank you.
I'm aware of the issues in Springfield. The difficulty with those is the size of them, and also understand there have been people living in some of them or utilising them for workspaces, which then presents us problems with recovering. We can't just go and remove them. We have to take further action. So we are aware of that. We've got several cases open on Springfield Road at the moment that we're looking into to try and get them removed, because they're the HGV trailers you're talking about, the very big ones. Yeah.
Councillor Cord?
Are there any other hotspots besides the Springfield Road that we talk about in terms of HGV or other trailers that we might come across in the borough that we know of where these actions can be taken? Thank you.
Not at the moment, but part of the data collection that we're doing at the moment is to try and identify the hotspots, to be more proactive, to be able to get out and obviously hit a certain area and go around, and maybe it might be to do with abandoned vehicles, might be to do with fly tipping or anything else, but to recognise those areas and try and get ahead and get out there to be more proactive. That's what we're looking at the moment.
Councillor Gaelic.
Thank you, Chair. So the report mentions the capacity of 6 officers to deal with those issues. Are those officers also dealing with other environmental enforcement issues, other nuisance?
Yes, they are. That's 6 officers for the borough.
Councillor Gaelic, do you wish to have a supplementary?
Just wanted to make sure that this capacity is completely what we can have for all the other environmental nuisance issues. Because I think 2 years ago, I read somewhere in the report that we were going to hire 4 extra officers. So I'm surprised it's only 6.
So we have, our responsibilities are split between LBH employed staff, and also we have a number of functions within Joe's area that are contracted out. So our on-street enforcement, for example, the FPN issuing, is contracted out to a separate company, and they will do the enforcement patrols. But we have 6 street scene enforcement officers who will carry out the inspections and the enforcement processes. We have 2 more senior investigators who may do some of the heavier investigating or the kind of complex criminal matters. But you referred to the kind of areas of responsibility within the service and all the other investigations that they have to carry out. So this team will investigate issues to do with fly tipping, different environmental nuisances, littering, and a whole host of other overgrown hedges, highway obstruction. So there's a really, really kind of large array of responsibilities that they have. But abandoned vehicles is within our top 3, along with fly tipping and waste accumulation. So that it does represent a high proportion of the overall work coming into Joe's area.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I wanted to go back to point 9 because I'm not sure I understood the process. So, if it's on private land, the council must provide 15 days notice. Fine. Then if the landowner objects during the 15 days, that means that you can't collect it at all, or you can collect it after the 15 days. Sorry, I didn't quite get the answer on that one. Thanks.
My apologies, Councillor. If the landowner objects to us removing the vehicle, we can't go onto the land and remove it.
Councillor Farley?
Again, just to clarify on this point, so if there's an environmental issue, such as a case that I've had, where there's rats and things living in that, and it's an environmental issue, that doesn't take precedence, as you still can't remove it, or what happens there? Sorry, I do have another question, Chair. I just want to get some clarity on this, sorry.
Yes, Councillor, it wouldn't be removed under the abandoned vehicle legislation. We'd probably look at the Environmental Protection Act and the statutory nuisance, so we would use alternative legislation.
Thank you. I would have put it up. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Farley, you've asked your supplementary. I will now go to Councillor Gold, and I'll come back to you to finish, if that's okay. And then we'll move on to the next item, because we need to make progress on the agenda this evening. Any further questions can be submitted through to Democratic Services outside of the meeting. Councillor Gohill?
Thank you, Chair. On page 37, so item 16, it talks about the use of GIS mapping and the Love Clean Streets app. I was just wondering if there was a timeline for the full rollout of the app, or when we might be able to expect, when residents might be able to expect to use it.
We don't know. I know that we are currently working with our colleagues in digital and intelligence to develop process maps and to develop all the kind of configuration. But as far as a kind of hard start date, I don't think that one has been committed to yet. I think Richard might have more information.
Richard? Yes, thank you. Just only to say that it's not there isn't one date, as I understand it, for digital intelligence, because the platform we use for multiple issues. So it'll be rolled out over time and issues added. I was told today that indicatively we're looking at our go live in the first stage around November, so hopefully fairly soon we'll start to see some of the functionality coming in.
Okay, thank you.
And to finish off, Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I was on a similar vein with that, with the app. I'm just curious as to why what my understanding was that the council wasn't engaging with this particular website app, if it's the way I think it is. So I'm curious as to what's changed that we are now looking at using it, if it is the same one I think it is.
I don't think that's a question that we can answer for the service. That's been a council decision on behalf of digital and intelligence. So they would have put forward a paper for a solution that would have addressed many different services. As far as our service is concerned, we have a need for a better way to be able to report issues to us, and that has been looked at collectively across the whole council by digital and intelligence colleagues.
Thank you very much. Okay, as per the recommendation on pages 33, it's for the Resident Services Committee to note the contents of the report. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you to Joanne and Stephanie for your attendance this evening. You may leave if you wish to do so. Thank you. Our next item is the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Safer Hillingdon Partnership Performance Update, item 5, pages 9 to 24. And we're joined this evening by Chief Inspector Ben Wright and Richard Webb. Good evening to you both. Richard, would you like to introduce this item, and then we'll pass over to the police?
Thank you, Chair. And I'll be very brief, as you have had the chance to have a look at the report from us before the meeting. And I appreciate the bulk of the information has come from the police. Just a few points to highlight, perhaps, from a Community Safety Council perspective. We have Jan Noble here with us, who's joined us recently as Head of Safer Communities and Vulnerabilities, and who leads on work relating to the Community Safety Partnership. You'll see in the report, the focus over the last few months has been on developing our new Community Safety Strategy, which went to the Safer Hillingdon Partnership for provisional agreement in its last meeting ended in July. The intention now, as part of our governance framework, is to take that strategy to Cabinet for agreement to go to public consultation on it, and we'll bring that strategy here to this committee for comment during the consultation process. Supporting that strategy, as the report refers to, we've established a number of new working groups, one focused very much on place-based issues, for crime and community safety in particular, and we're also working on developing a new integrated offender panel under probation leadership, which will look at reducing reoffending. I'm happy to take questions, obviously, but I'll hand over to Chief Inspector Wright for the police update.
Evening, everybody. Again, you've seen the report, so I won't dwell too long. I suppose just a general overarching picture for us at the moment. Obviously, lots of pressure on the police at the moment across the board. I think the recent figures are 19,000 shifts abstracted owing to public demonstrations, policing large-scale events, etc., which places us in a very challenging position, as well as against a backdrop of further cuts to the extent of 1,700 people across the organisation, owing to essentially a budget gap that's about £180 million per year, as sort of stated by the Commissioner recently. So it's a challenging backdrop with further sort of ongoing large-scale protests to manage and quite a bit of change work going on internally, as well as sort of complicated by the sort of broader conditions in this criminal justice system, for example, early prison releases and court backlogs. So that's the sort of the bigger strategic picture in terms of the challenges that we face. In terms of locally, in spite of that kind of complex and at some points rather depressing picture, there has been some really good progress made locally over the last couple of years. I mean, I think one of the most important things is the homicide rate at the moment is 0 this year. You go back two years, and that was quite a bit higher, 4 times higher, 5 times higher. Again, we're seeing drops in some of the kind of key areas in terms of serious youth violence and across the neighbourhood crime types that we would refer to. Things like burglary are down this year, theft from motor vehicles is down, shoplifting, again, has been a real area of focus, and we're seeing some really positive improvements there owing to the work that we've done. So there's quite a few sort of really positive aspects in there. Things that remain a challenge for us at the moment include robbery. Again, that's completely out of kilter with sort of other areas in London. It's much lower, but it's still something that is on our radar as an area of focus that we wish to see reduced further. And that I use the phrase robbery, but I'd include e-bike theft and sort of theft from person as well in that, and motor vehicle crime, as in theft of vehicles, which again is a national trend and is also an area of focus. So that's kind of a very, very quick overarching picture, and I won't give much more because I think it's probably easier to jump into the questions and hopefully pick up an answer as required.
Thank you very much. I invite questions from members. If you can indicate, please. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. So we've seen the Met under sort of Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan forced to pause recruitment. There's talks in the report about £450 million funding gap. I just wanted to know, how is that impacting Hillingdon residents specifically, and are our residents losing out on neighbourhood officers because of these budget allocations?
Yeah, I mean it's very hard to sort of call out the impacts directly. I mean, neighbourhood officers, generally speaking, are ring-fenced, and that's a service that we seek to protect to the greatest extent that we can, because ultimately we recognise its importance. Though, of course, budget cuts, reduced staff numbers against a backdrop of increased demand makes it very challenging for our officers to deliver. It makes it a very high-pressure environment for people to work in. They do an incredible job in very difficult circumstances. I suppose it produces a myriad of complexities, not necessarily those that I could link specifically to Hillingdon, but across the board for us in terms of restructuring, a whole bunch of pressures really. Ultimately, we would love to do more. I think people would love us to do more. In order to do that, we need more funding, and that's something that the Commission is very clear about.
Councillor Gohill. Thank you.
A myriad of complexities sums it up quite well. Just off the back of that, I am concerned that whilst the Met talked about sort of rebuilding trust, we are seeing on a day-to-day basis that officers are being stretched thinner and thinner, and resources are being cut back. And I just wanted to ask you how confident you were that Hillingdon won't be left behind whilst these resources are diverted elsewhere into London.
Yeah, again, a complex question. I think obviously we prioritise risk, and we weigh all of our decisions based upon risk. We weigh the restructuring and things we do based on risk. I think the organisation over the last couple of years has made significant changes to the way in which it works, which have driven an awful lot of efficiencies, and as I've just explained to you in terms of some of the reductions we've seen, that's against a really, really challenging backdrop. So I think in that sense that's a real success, and that's owing to some incredibly hard work and some good decisions in many cases, and due to the resilience of our teams. But absolutely, our role often is just prioritising risk. It's a constant game of prioritising based on the resources we have versus the demand we face.
Councillor Core.
Thank you. Just picking up on prioritising risks. So, for example, if there was a demonstration within Hillingdon, you will have resources here vis-a-vis a demonstration in central London. Do I get that right? If there's a risk here of shifting, because it's all about shifting resources, isn't it? You move into central London if there are demonstrations. So if there are real risks within the borough, you would then prioritise the borough over sending your people to central London. Is that how it works?
It's very complex, but ultimately it's a risk analysis, right? So if there's something that would warrant an additional attendance in Hillingdon because there's a sort of a credible piece of intelligence or information suggesting it needs a response, then absolutely that's factored into the kind of broader risk assessment and factored into the resourcing decisions that take place. Yeah. No worries.
Councillor Core, do you wish to follow up?
It's a different question. Violence against women and girls. It says Hillingdon Police have run targeted initiatives. I just wanted to know, are these still on, or if the projects have finished, and if they have finished, what was the outcome of it, and what did we, how have we benefited from the project? The Project Vigilant, which deployed uniformed and plainclothes officers in nighttime economy. It says police have run targeted initiatives. I'm just wondering if they're still on, or are we done with the projects? And if we are done with the projects, what were the outcomes? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, VORG for us is very much one of our key priorities and one of the things that we really want to deliver on. I think it's well known the sort of scope and scale of the problem across London and across the UK. And it's certainly, when we're looking at those kind of resourcing and prioritisation decisions, very high up there on the radar in terms of where we place our resources. And you can see that in terms of how we've restructured across the organisation in terms of building really strong public protection departments. So the fully staffed unit in our command here is the public protection team, with a significant number of people. And as a result of the New Met for London plan, I think there was something about 550 extra persons placed into those units, as well as additional capacity in terms of technical skills and analytical skills, etc., to help with very complex investigations. We as a neighbourhoods team basically strive to kind of break down barriers, if you like. There are lots of hard to reach communities, lots of people who don't know how to ask for help, or people who are in crisis who can't see the wood for the trees ultimately. So we do an awful lot of engagement events that are on a rolling basis, things like walk and talks, as an example, or drop-in centres. We also run operations, so Operation Vigilant is one of those. We run them fairly regularly, and normally we always get arrests in relation to those, but it's a sort of cyclical thing, so I don't have figures for them to hand. We also do other work with licensed premises, for example, around how they can help respond to females who are at risk. We do a lot of work around Freshers' Weeks, for example, in terms of education and prevention work. So rest assured, 100%, it's not kind of a once project and done. It's a kind of a constant cycle of things, and we're always looking for new ideas and ways to improve it, and we work with Richard's team on a lot of that as well.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Given that Hayes and Harlington Police Station is about to lose its front counter, what plans have the Met and the Safer Hillingdon Partnership got in place to ensure that local residents that aren't tech savvy, that don't have access to computers, that don't have vehicles, that don't have a vehicle as such to get themselves online, to get themselves support? What have we got in place to protect that? Because from my understanding, Hillingdon is going to be the only area to have no front counter. So if you had to go and report a crime, etc., you'd have to go to Hounslow, Acton, etc.?
Yeah, so again, I think it's important to go back to the root cause of this, and the root cause of this is a significant funding gap in the hundreds of millions.
Yep.
And the reason the organisation is looking at front counters is because they're trying to sustain frontline services, because it's a choice of things like your front counter service or the police officer that works as your DWO. It's not a choice that we want to make. It's a tough choice, as the programme of work is called. I think the key thing at the moment is there's been lots of feedback that's been taken in. The data and the conversation is still playing out in sort of the project team in the centre, as we call it, to determine exactly what that provision is or isn't going to be look like. Though, as you well know, the initial consultation was that Hillingdon would close. Mm-hmm. I still don't have a final decision on that, so we need to wait for that before we then decide what the next course of action would be. I think it is worth noting that the kind of attendance at that station, it's about 4 crime reports a day. So 4 people go to that station per day on average and report a crime, which is an incredibly low number. So that's something I've just been furnished with recently, which again prompts a bit of thinking. So I don't have an answer for you at the moment because the decision hasn't been finalised, but we do need to look at how that will work thereafter and what the existing provision will be across the BCU. And I know one of my colleagues has been appointed to basically grip that issue and lead on it. That's as much as I can give you at the moment, Councillor.
Yeah.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, can I just come back on that? Then the figures you've given me, that there was only 4 crimes reported. So I'm assuming that there would be other attendances there for people that had driving licence producers, advice, people on bail conditions, etc. So there would be more than effectively 4 people attending.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just, saying that, it just makes it clear that, obviously the concern, and your concern and my concern, is around vulnerable people.
Yeah.
4 people a day is still 4 people that we want to make sure are well looked after, and I agree with you. We need to make sure that there's provision in place for those persons, especially can't report via digital means, for example. Yeah. You're absolutely right, and we need to cross that bridge when we come to it. I don't disagree with you. And you're right, there are other aspects that are sort of more technical, if you like, in terms of the reasons that people would attend that station. So it does perform other functions as well, yes.
Okay, thank you.
No,
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I was to say thank you to officers. There's some good statistics showing here. The sort of the perverse one in a sense is the violence against women and girls, because I take it as a positive that there's more reporting going on, because it is a hidden crime. So I take that as a positive that is going up in the fact that it's being reported, but obviously it's not good that it's happening. I just wanted to ask, when we've got statistics from VOG through to motor vehicle crime and shoplifting, the ASB and the drug-related crime don't have the same types of statistics listed as we've got for the other items. I was wondering whether or not you have that information that you can give to the committee now or a later point.
I don't have that, and I can certainly take that as a point to reflect in the report for the next select committee. That's fair feedback, absolutely.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you. And just talking on resourcing as well, so this is page 4 of your report, second paragraph. So we've got at least 2 dedicated ward officers and 1 PCSO per ward, so that's the minimum that we have, and it says that that's what we have. I'm wondering whether or not there are wards in the borough that have more than this, or is that the case across all, and also where we've got wards where they have dedicated officers, but I recall in the midst of time that we've had certain circumstances where we have had officers assigned to those wards, but they're not on long-term sick or maternity or things like that. So do we have a sort of gaps in relation to that, or are we completely full, everyone's working, and we've got the minimum capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose to start with your, how many do you have on each ward? The default is 2 PCs, that is, specifically. There are three wards that are based on essentially crime data and research, have a slightly higher complement of 4. So Wood End, Colum and Cowley, and Hayes Town has 5 and a dedicated sergeant due to the demand there. and we are slowly increasing the PCSO numbers, so quite a few of the wards are increasing to 2, and there's sort of a 3-year plan to try and get that up to 2 across the board, funding permitting, and that is the sort of big point at the moment. That was very much part of the plan of a new Met for London. In terms of, I suppose, the people management aspect, there's obviously always a churn, whether that's sort of, joiners, movers, leavers, sickness, etc. We've done a lot, certainly I've done a lot, to make sure that we're applying our policies fairly and robustly around managing sickness, managing abstractions and all those things, so that we maximise time on the ground, essentially. We are our full complement at the moment, which is great, and we've also had experienced sort of officers who were thinking about moving elsewhere, who've decided of their own volition to stay because they're enjoying what they're doing and they're making progress, so, which is a great sign. I'd love to have more, obviously, as we all would. Hopefully that kind of covers most of it.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, and thank you, Ben, as ever, for coming here and answering our questions. When I go out and about knocking on doors, talking to residents, as I like to do, both in Ruislip and around the borough on a regular basis, one of the things I hear, I was in Ruislip the other day, about low-level crime, people trying to break into cars, attempted burglary, people witnessing shoplifting, antisocial behaviour that probably stems from antisocial into a crime. And the thing that worried me the most was people just turning around, well, it's going on, but there's no point in reporting it because the police do nothing. I just wondered how you're proactively trying to tackle that apathy.
Yeah, look, I think fundamentally the most important thing to try and do is make sure that the individual instances that are reported to us are dealt with as effectively as possible, and equally where we can't deal with it in the way that maybe an individual would like, that at least things are properly explained to them so they understand the picture. Very often with most of what you have just described, you're referring to volume crime ultimately, and the way that you ultimately detect volume crime isn't investigating each one of those cases to the nth degree as though it were a murder, because it's prohibitive in terms of cost. You just can't do it. And actually the way that you detect those crimes is through developing an intelligence picture and then using that intelligence to selectively target those offenders and stop the crimes occurring. So very often everybody's, that kind of information that's shared with us is fundamental and key to us ultimately stopping either them becoming a repeat victim of crime or others becoming the victim of a perpetrator or a group of perpetrators. And it's trying to convey that message as much as possible, which is, you reporting that instance, say, of you've seen somebody trying to break into a car, may not lead to us detecting specifically that car break-in, but it will help us find the thief that is responsible for a series. You might not know about it directly, but no doubt about it, that is how we find them. That's the key message, ultimately. And I think that's something we're trying to make clearer through our corporate communications as well.
Councillor Smallwood.
And you've come on to my next question around corporate communications, the use of social media, and I think I ask this to you most years when you come before us. I still think there is a place for councillors, the council, community leaders to help promote some of those messages, and I would urge the police to actually put, and I know you're stretched and I know you need to be fighting crime, but actually positive news stories do make a difference. For example, when you cracked a lot of the shoplifters in Ruislip, that was shared in the local community group, created a load of positivity. I think there was about a couple of years ago you got hold of a few burglars who had been burgling in the north of the borough. That creates a positive message, and I just wondered if there was any strategy or something in place, whether throughout the Met, to use local stakeholders as sort of like a mouthpiece to deliver good news, because 23% down on burglary in a year, that's a good news story for the police in Hillingdon, right? But the first time I read about it, or the first time I heard about it, was probably either sitting at the Hillingdon Neighbourhood Board, which, with due respect, at times is just a small group of people repeating the same things, which has got a place, but it's how do we take that from these small groups of people that are meeting in little huts out into the community. So I guess there's two questions there. One, how do the police spread that message? But also, I'm going to say, how do we hold our safer neighbourhood boards of residents accountable, and I don't mean literally accountable as like we as councillors, but accountable to deliver those good news stories out into the community? how do we go about harvesting good news? Because I don't think we do it as well as we could.
No, look, I agree with you. I think, every day I come in and I read amazing things that have been done by, incredible people, ultimately. The challenge is always that the demand is relentless, and that they, servicing people's needs is obviously our key focus, and it has to be. So we simply can't do it to the extent that we would like, and recent budget cuts have, again, for example, led to us losing one of the local media officers that was dedicated to that work, which makes it yet still harder. I suppose the good news is that I know we've just launched Met Engage, which is used sort of successfully across many other forces, and we have the highest uptake of residents in any borough in London, which is absolutely fantastic, and that is sort of a direct tool we can use to sort of circulate good messages, but also work on crime prevention and responding to crimes as well. So that's certainly a medium that I'm hoping to use extensively, going to your point about strategy. So we're doing a lot of work to promote the kind of uptake of that service. The aspiration ultimately is to get as many kind of residents from Hillingdon on there as possible so that we can circulate news, and to sort of embed that as sort of BAU in terms of it becomes sort of a performance metric and a thing that is considered when we look at kind of annual reviews for all of our officers, so they get into the habit where they can of communicating out good work, and communicating more broadly, notwithstanding the priority remains dealing with the crime. And corporately, I think they do what they can in that space as well, and there is a lot of work that goes on to promote the news. It's just, the volumes are overwhelming.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. My question is just off the back of Councillor Davies' question surrounding the front desk, and in your response to him, you said, it's a case of either having a front desk officers or having officers on the front line. But then earlier in some of my questions, we sort of talked about officers who are on our front line then being diverted elsewhere in London. And I just can't help but feel when I hear these pieces of information that actually Hillingdon residents end up losing out twice as a result of this. So, we don't have officers at our front desk because our police stations are potentially closing down, or closing down, but without a final decision. And at the same time, the officers who are then meant to be on our front lines are then being triaged elsewhere in London, maybe Westminster, because of protests, etc. And I know it's not permanent, but there's a lot of them going on, and so and we hear it from our SMT teams as well. A lot of the time, they are being diverted to other areas based on risk, quite rightly. I just in light of some of the, and I know you said there's only 4 people who come in a day. In light of some of the stats that we've seen, like the 10% increase in reports for violence against women and girls, for example, I just feel it's really important to keep that resource there and keep the police, the few police officers we have within Hillingdon. And I was just wondering if I suppose my question is just wondering if there's a way that you can relay that back to anyone who might listen, anyone who might make those decisions, because it does really feel like at this point in time that Hillingdon residents are going to be losing out twice as a result of these closures, and we've already seen it being squeezed thinner and thinner and thinner over many years.
Yeah, no, thank you. There's quite a lot in that. I suppose firstly, obviously the drawdown of resources on sort of what we call aid and providing support to the centre is equitable across the MPS. Everybody has to do it. It's not ideal, and it does draw people away from local provision to the extent of 19,000 shifts per year, as I said earlier, which is significant. That's not in Hillingdon, that's across the Met. And as you say, it does potentially feel like a double bite at the cherry. The decision hasn't yet been finalised, so we're talking in hypotheticals at the moment, and I think that's probably something I'm going to have to give you an update on when we've got more clarity, probably at the next meeting. In terms of have we fed back the kind of sentiment and the thoughts locally, 100%. There's been quite broad consultation, and those comments and those thoughts and feelings have very much been fed back. We're in a really challenging position. We don't want to close those stations. We don't want to reduce our headcount. We would like to do more. We can't because of money, and that's because we haven't been funded to the requirement. Policing I think there was a recent HMIC report that said police officers doing about 44% more work than they were about 10 years ago. The population of London has increased, the complexity in London has increased, the crime has increased, especially now you've got cyber and online crime, yet, the funding has not. You know, and I think Baroness Casey was clear in her recent review that actually there should be about 9,000 additional officers policing London if funding had been maintained at the levels it was in 2010, which it hasn't. So, you know, difficult choices as a consequence have to be made, and I'll know more about this one in due course.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. Just before I move on to my second question, which is separate, I just wanted to say that whilst the takeaway for people moving into central London is something that impacts all boroughs, as Councillor Davies quite rightly pointed out, Hillingdon's the only area that will now have no police stations in the local area. Hence my sentiment about residents losing out twice. My second question, Chair, was actually around New Met for London and OWL. OWL, as we all knew, OWL switched over to New Met for London. I was just wondering, and as you probably are aware, Hillingdon had the largest number of take-ups of signatories of OWL. I was wondering what the take-up was for the New Met for London sign-ups, because it's meant to be kind of all-in-one system is how it was explained to me. I was just wondering what the take-up was from residents in Hillingdon, if you have any information on that, please.
Yeah, of course. So, again, going back to Luton twice, there are other stations across the organisation that are in scope for being closed as part of that kind of conversational document. So, look, Hillingdon residents are potentially going to lose their station, no doubt about it, as may some others, as part of these cuts. Equally, they may not. We have to wait and see what the kind of final decisions are. In terms of OWL, the sign-up at the moment is about 8,000 members, which puts us significantly further ahead than a vast swathe. I think on OWL we had about 30,000 there. I think there were a significant number that were dormant. We might take a third of that as dormant. So probably, you know, near enough half where we used to be in terms of active engaged members. We're doing a lot of work to sort of promote that, and I think we're seeing the uptick in terms of membership. It's currently about 1,000 a month, which is where I'd like to keep it, and we just build that over the course of time, because I think it's a great tool. And certainly, as you know, Councillor Smallwood was alluding to a little while ago around the comms strategy and the importance of engaging, that's probably the best medium for us. If I can get my officers talking to local people about local issues, it makes it meaningful. Nobody wants loads of information that's not relevant to them, and this is the way forward, I think. So that is a real positive for us. So Met Engage is going well.
Councillor Gaelic.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to community monitoring groups. So in Hillingdon there are 8 meetings a year, and specifically they scrutinize the use of stop and search, so that people review the footage. So it's interesting to know, are they well attended? Typically, how many residents would attend? And second question, how many stop and search encounters there were in the last quarter, or perhaps in the last 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So the groups, the community monitoring groups, they're small deliberately, because the idea is you have a sort of a range of body-worn video options to view, and then a couple of people will select them and view them. So normally about 3 people will go through them, but then we rotate those 3 people, so it's not the same 3 people all the time. And the idea is, you know, that they get to then watch that footage and see those encounters take place, and the feedback is always broadly very, very positive in terms of professionalism of the officers and the real difficulty you face in using that power and that tool, and they're impressed with how they managed what is a very difficult encounter many times. In terms of the number of stop and searches, ballpark it's about 3,000 a year. We see a steady increase in Hillingdon, which I'm really happy about, and we also see a steady increase in the detection rate, essentially, the positive outcome rate as we call it, which is about 36% at the moment, which is really high. That means basically 1 in every 3 people you stop has got something they shouldn't have on them. And if you think that quite regularly we might be stopping a group of 3 people together and then finding one of them's got the goods on them, so to speak, then, you know, that you could interpret that as much better than 36%. It depends how you look at the figures. But I'm genuinely really happy with how we're using that at the moment, and would like to see us sort of just keep creeping it up whilst keep retaining that kind of high outcome rate. That's the key. Councillor Gaelic, do you wish to have a supplementary? If you can use your mic.
supplement will be concerning the youth participation or involvement. Because police cadets programs, we are reading here that there's the Hillingdon Youth Council is represented both on Independent Advisory Group and Safer Neighbourhoods Board. So I wanted to know how many of young people are involved in each of those groups in Hillingdon.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, I think there's a sort of a core of the Youth Services Council, sort of a key group of leaders, and normally we have representation from one or two of them at each of those events. And they're great because they introduce just a totally different way of thinking and looking at things and provoke some really good questions. We also have another group of youth that we sort of meet with quarterly, which is quite informal, to really just sort of discuss local policing issues and issues in the area. And again, they ask some really testing and brilliant questions and give you a really different perspective. So they're both sort of valuable inputs, and they do some good work as well in terms of projects for the council and others. No worries.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. As always, I've got another curveball. The job roles, I know a number of desk staff or not active policemen, but stuff like the licensing team have had to reapply for their roles, etc. Do we think that is going to pose a threat to our licensed premises, our new premises that are opening, because we could have a licensing team that do not know the area? From my understanding, that we could be teamed up with someone for Kensington, etc. Is there a risk for our licensed trade, our off licences, our gaming areas, that we're allowing them to open without the relevant conditions, or licensees that have had slap on the wrist before, etc.? Is that a risk, do you think, with the change in role?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned at the start, obviously we had a significant number of posts have been removed. That's about 900 across frontline policing, some of which were people who worked in our partnership and prevention hubs, which is the teams that I believe you're talking about. In terms of licensing is a statutory responsibility that we have to meet, and I also share your sort of support for it, which is that it's key to sort of reducing violent crime as well as other org and other types of crime. Yeah. So absolutely the organisation intends to maintain its kind of provision of licensing, though how it does it is having to look at that at the moment, because we can't afford the headcount in the way that we used to. So some of those other roles have already gone, licensing hasn't, it remains in situ, but it is subject to a restructure. As things stand, they're looking at sort of a pod-based system where a series of people will cover a number of boroughs. It might be that for the West area BCU, as things stand at the moment, you might have a couple of people covering, 2 or 3 people covering the area. It's still subject to consultation, and the sort of design phase is still ongoing, so I can't give you a sort of concrete, this is what the product will look like. But absolutely the aspiration is to retain the people that are currently doing the best job possible, and get them into those roles and keep them delivering. I don't know exactly what the final kind of outcome is in terms of structure, org structure.
Councillor Davis?
Where do I go with this one? A number of years ago, I think it's about 2 years ago, we had the MP for Uxbridge say that the front counter at Uxbridge Police Station was saved and was going to reopen. Have we got any update on that? Because it seems to have been a few years now, we've not seen it open. So there was a big social media campaign that had been saved, it was open, and I'm just, is there anything, has that gone, was it ever happening?
I mean, that probably predates my time here, so I'm not familiar with that conversation. Though, you know, as we've just discussed, the kind of broader position for the organisation at the moment is that we're seeking to close, potentially, Hayes, depending on that consultation, and certainly there's no suggestion in there that we're looking to open Uxbridge.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have Councillor Core next, but before I do, is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? Kind of lock it down now and then we're going to move on. So Councillor Smallwood, anyone else? Councillor Farley. Okay, Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of youth participation and vis-a-vis Baroness cases review, how well are we doing in terms of diversity, our representation, the police image, especially with regards to stop and search as well? How has the culture improved on the ground? Do we see the real difference in perception? That's my first one.
That's a very broad question. It's a very big question. There's an awful lot of work that's gone on internally around professional standards that the Commissioner has been incredibly clear about, and you've seen us sort of purge people from our organisation that aren't suitable to be there, and that sort of process is still ongoing. It's very robust. You've seen the Commissioner have regulations changed to support the removal of people who don't pass their vetting, for example, which is something that we couldn't do before. So there's been a significant uplift in terms of, one, the regulations and legislation that enable us to remove people from the organisation, and the number of people engaged in those kind of investigations. And the reason I mention that is, fundamental to having a sort of an inclusive organisation is getting rid of the people that are, abjectly not inclusive and perpetrating horrible crimes themselves. So we've made massive strides in that sense, and that's certainly felt and seen. That sort of cultural piece has gone quite a lot further in terms of there are groups internally driving kind of a culture directorate, if you like, and culture work across the organisation in terms of inclusivity. It's a bit of a chicken egg thing, isn't it? But I personally believe you can't have diversity until you create an environment where people are comfortable coming into work and being themselves. That would be unfair to kind of drive recruitment and bring people into a hostile and unpleasant environment. Not to say it was, but getting those things right is key. In terms of recruitment, obviously recruitment is paused at the moment because of budget cuts, which is challenging. But that, I haven't got the specific figures to hand, but it's available online. But there has been quite a significant uptick in terms of diversity. There's still a way to go, but certainly women are more represented in the force across the piece and at higher levels, as are people from a whole range of communities. And West Area BCU, the last time I looked, actually had the highest representation and recruitment from diverse communities as well, which is fantastic. So, it's work that's absolutely ongoing, and I think it, to sort of talk to your last point, in terms of the stop and search, the vast majority of people, or the overall number of people that are stopped in Hillingdon are white, male. There is still a disparity in terms of if you are a black male, you are more likely to be stop and search proportionally. Doesn't play out to the same extent as it does in other areas. But equally, I'm sort of reassured by that in terms of the kind of the positive outcome rate that we have is showing that we are stopping the right people. 99% of those encounters are recorded on body-worn video, and anybody can complain at any point, and the whole thing can be reviewed. We have hardly any complaints in relation to those encounters. And the community monitoring group are generally reporting positively as well, and back to MOPAC. So I think, we must never be complacent, and you've always got to kind of keep a focus on that. I certainly want my teams to come into work and feel comfortable coming into work, and, there's no doubt about it that having people from all kinds of different backgrounds enables us to kind of engage and work more broadly. So that's something we've got to keep driving forwards, and we'll keep doing that.
Councillor Cole?
How is your partnership going with the council, and what can we do to improve it if there's any room for improvement?
I think we'd always like some more money, wouldn't we? That'd be all right, wouldn't it? If you could sort that out, that'd be good. Look, Richard and I, Jan, and other colleagues, we speak regularly, we talk regularly. I think we've known each other for a little while now because we've had some stability in terms of our posts and people in role, which really helps because you build trust and you're able to get things done a lot more quickly and a lot more efficiently. And I think, just going back to some of those figures earlier on, you can see some of the results of that work. And I don't think we're getting complacent either. I think we're constantly trying to find improvements and trying to squeeze a bit more out, and trying to deliver a bit more. So, always open to feedback. It's always a gift. But yeah, it's going well. There's certainly no elephants in the room. There's no glaring things that I think we need to address. We've just got to keep trying to learn and keep trying to improve. No worries.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Ben, to bring you back to Hayes Police Station. I recognise one of the frustrating things, I guess, about this particular item every year is often you come here, you're here to answer for operational decisions of the Met, not necessarily political decisions that a variety of different people have made, but unfortunately the two sometimes blend. I have concerns around experience that the Met has on when police stations or front counters have closed and criminals or former criminals who are on remand or have bail conditions that require them to report to a police station, if that police station is further away, does that make the likelihood of them turning up there to meet their bail conditions lower? Because that will obviously be a concern to residents if criminals are not adhering to their bail conditions.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to there is sort of the risk of failure demand, i.e., that sort of provision isn't in place. Does that then generate more work and more further issues elsewhere? So that is something we're very cognizant of. It's not something, Councillor Small, I've got an answer to at the moment because I'm still waiting, on what the final provision looks like and how, what the sort of plan will be around those specific issues, though that they are very much part of that consideration and decision making for obvious reasons. We can't not, and it's something we would seek to get right. It always comes back to money. The challenge is at the moment we just don't have the money.
Councillor Small.
Yeah, another difficult one. I'm afraid. Sorry, Ben. There's obviously a lot of noise in the media, and in some cases, quite rightly, around low sanctions for crimes against other crimes that the public perceive. One should be higher than the other, and I think in some situations that is very fair. What work are you doing to sort of like regain public trust? And I know it's very difficult because often it's not you that dishes out the sanction, but actually I think people for some reason sort of assume that the police are directly involved. What work are you doing in that area, which is obviously incredibly complicated, to try and regain trust specifically on crimes that may have taken place in Hillingdon?
I think there's a real challenge with perception at the moment, and that much of that is brought about owing to the broader state of the criminal justice system. Prison releases, have perpetuated this kind of idea that there is no sanction, or you get away with things, and that sort of broader piece in terms of how sentencing, how rehabilitation, what kind of options are on the table. It's something that really needs a lot of work ultimately, and that sort of isn't that's not to cast aspersions on anyone in those roles because they're struggling and have against challenging backdrops. But that's that isn't policing. That we aren't the judge and the jury. We are those that sort of present the facts and the evidence to them for an outcome to take place. But we mustn't. Those that go there into those systems receive punishment, receive rehabilitation for their crimes, and certainly, as you scale up the ladder of more severe crime, there are some very hefty punishments that are meted out, and sadly, that's often one of the challenges, as you see a sort of an escalating pattern of offending, and maybe we're not seeing the intervention we'd like until it's become a lot more serious, which is sad for all concerned. So there are definitely things, and I don't think these are, this is something that's been talked about in the media. This is something governments are aware of. The prison population challenges are very much discussed and known about, but it's something that's certainly not something that I'm sort of directly influencing, though if it was more efficient, it would certainly help. Yeah.
And to finish off the item, Councillor Farley, please.
Thank you, Chair. The issue of the police station, obviously, understandably, is quite contentious. We've all got our own concerns about that for different reasons. Just doing my own bit of research on this, looking at the history, since 2010, there were 4 station encounters that were closed from 2010 to 2013, which were under a previous mayor. So I imagine that some of these debates and discussions would have been having, so there's information to draw on there in terms of what decisions. What I'm a little bit concerned with is a comment that was made where I'm sure this is not what you meant, but when you said you'll cross that bridge when we come to it, in terms of what's going to happen with some of these things, like people that are on bail or whatever, they've got to come to the station to report. I would hope that that sort of has been looked into, and there is learning to be done from the previous closures of counters in the other stations that were closed since 2010. But I'm also, to try and do away from the politics, which is what we're not meant to be doing on this committee, I would want to echo what Councillor Smallwood was talking about, which is the good news stories and the promoting of that, because I think that is crucial, because it does link in with, in my opinion, residents' engagement with police. If they're seeing that there's results, they are more likely to report, and it's one of the things that we are hearing, as has been said on this committee tonight, that people are, why do we bother, because nothing happens. So I think that it's quite critical that good news is given out to residents on a regular basis. On the owl replacement, when owl was introduced, I recall going to an event, I think might have been at the Global Academy, where there was a lot of discussion about, in certain areas, particularly in the south of the borough, the take-up was difficult to secure. With the new system, is that still the case, or have you got data on where that it's being taken up better than other places, or is it sort of, to your knowledge, quite sort of evenly taken up by residents across the borough?
So, Chief Inspector, can you put your mic on?
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? Yes. So, in terms of across the bridge piece, ultimately, whatever happens, we have to have a system and a process in place in order to deal with persons on bail, etc. And we will. And the mechanics of that we can't figure out until we know the places that we have as options. And that's what I mean by, we've got to cross that bridge. We can't decide the processes and how things will work until we know sort of the chess pieces on the board, if you like. So, yes, you're right. That is what I mean. I very much take your point around good news stories, and also from Councillor Ford, and I appreciate that as well. I really do. I know my teams will. So, thank you. And we will do what we can. And I will be continuing to drive that, particularly through Met Engage, which leads me on to my last point. So the owl replacement is called Met Engage. Traditionally, absolutely, with OWL, there was a higher representation in the north of the borough, and it sort of drops off as you sort of scan further down. What's great about Met Engage is how data rich it is. So actually, it really enables us to see those trends and see the uptick, and also get performance statistics in terms of how well our kind of local officers are doing in terms of sign-ups. So one of the things that I'm really keen on is my PCSOs, who should be leading a lot of engagement locally, taking responsibility for kind of increasing sign-ups on their respective wards and engaging with their, it's a good opportunity for them to get out and speak to people, get to know them, introduce themselves, as well as get people signed up on this tool. So it very much is sort of feeding into a performance framework and performance meetings, and we're trying to absolutely have an even position across the borough, because we've got to make sure that the south of the borough, particularly, where we have higher crime rates, we've got that level of engagement, and we're using it as effectively as possible. So it's very much on the radar.
Your supplementary, Councillor Farley.
Thank you. No, sorry, I just say thank you. Thank you, officers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The recommendation on page 9 is to note the report. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief Inspector, and the officers, for your attendance this evening. You're free to leave if you wish to do so.
Thanks, Councillor. Cheers.
Thank you. We move on now to our next item for this evening, which is item 6, the Budget and Spending Report, pages 25 to 32. And we have a full attendance this evening, more or less, with a range of different officers. So good evening to Dan, Kerry, Matt, Kerry, Bernard, Julia and Gary. I'm assuming, Dan, you'd like to take the lead on this one and introduce the reports.
Thank you, Chairman. Hope you can hear me okay. So I'm Dan Kennedy, the Corporate Director for Homes and Communities. Unfortunately, Kerry couldn't make it this evening, but so I'll do my very best to answer the questions across her directorate. So the report sets out the 24-25 outturn position as finalised, with explanations for variance within the report. And we've also included within the report as well the month 2, 25, 26 position, which includes obviously a breakdown of the savings proposals and progress against those within the report. You'll also see in the report that there is explanation in the paragraphs where there's variance or where we have got plans in place to bring savings or incomes targets back on track if there is a risk in achieving those. So rather than perhaps repeat everything that's in the report, through you, Chairman, it might be best that we lead on to questions.
Absolutely, thank you. I invite questions, and we start with Councillor Gohill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. There's just a few things I wanted to get a bit of clarity on. I'll use my 2 questions to get clarity on 2 separate bits, if that's okay. The first is the garden waste charging shortfall. It's stated as £1 million, but it's not clear whether that's due to lower uptake, operational delays, or pricing strategy. Please can you give us a bit more information so we can get to the root cause of that?
Dan.
Thank you. So just to sort of, I suppose, a little bit of history. This scheme was introduced after a consultation in July. So it's actually been running for just over 2 months now. So we've achieved so with that red risk that £1 million is set out in the table on table 7. It's a little bit lower now from the latest budget forecast, but obviously we're working to month 2. But broadly speaking, that's about the same. So because of the consultation, obviously we've lost the first quarter in terms of the implementation, but we are confident that actually that full-year effect is a realistic income target, 2.5 million. So we are expecting to see some, and again it's difficult to know because it's we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but we are expecting to continue to see further subscriptions from residents during the remainder of the year, particularly as we enter into the autumn period where there's lots of leaves and obviously cuttings that need to be collected. I think the scheme will mature. I mean, in other boroughs where the schemes have been running clearly for much longer, for many years, uptake is much higher. So I'm confident actually that there will continue to be uptake. Whether or not we've achieved the full target this year, I couldn't look into my crystal ball with 100% confidence, but I am confident that it will continue for there to be further subscriptions. I should say as well a few other things. I mean, that was clearly the kind of full year effect was the best estimate, and again that was based on research comparisons with other boroughs. I would say as well, our offer continues to be better than other boroughs. It's the price is lower, the subscription cost is lower than other boroughs, and for at least 3/4 of the year we maintain a weekly collection. Many boroughs do not, and they still charge a higher amount than we are charging. So we continue to offer good value to residents, and anecdotally, there is understanding from residents about why we've introduced that service subscription charge, given the pressures, particularly in terms of the rising cost of waste disposal on the local authority. We still offer very good value for money.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. So my next question was about the savings that we carry forward. So the report mentioned £1.4 million of savings carried forward into 25-26 year, but the breakdown of this hasn't been itemised, or it's not clear to me. Could you just clarify a bit more? Could you just, well, I'm not asking you to itemise it, but could you break it down a bit more for us so we can have a bit more transparency into this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So if I could draw your attention to table 7 in the report. And apologies, we could have spelt that out a bit clearer in the text. But you've got a brought forward column in table 7 just after description, and it gives you the breakdown. So, for example, developing the commercial trade waste service, 260k was a brought forward from 24-25 into 25-26, and it details or provides the breakdown. But apologies that we didn't refer to that table in the text.
Councillor Corr.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dan, for this report. I just wanted to understand where it says 6.1 million of pressure is driven by temporary accommodation and general homelessness support, and further up it says that this increase is linked to the pressures the council is facing from having Heathrow in its boundaries. So can you kindly clarify what cost implications of Heathrow within our boundaries is to 6.1 million? Because I think that I found it very ambiguous in expression. So can you please clarify, of the 6.1, how does Heathrow within our boundaries affect, and to what extent? Thank you.
So there's we all know through this committee that there are more general, wider national pressures which we're experiencing, like all London boroughs, all local authorities with housing duties to homeless households. So the market, over the last, certainly since COVID, we've seen increases in housing costs rising by up to 30%, and we've seen 25% year-on-year increases in demand, sadly. And it's a combination of things, but increasingly a shrinkage in the private rented sector being available to households, and a difficulty accessing finance for people to buy their own homes. So that's a kind of a collision of a whole range of different factors, market and rising housing costs as well. So in terms of, I suppose, the specifics, so those are general backdrop costs which are adding pressures. The pressures in Hillingdon are compounded by the demand that is associated with Heathrow. So again, it's no surprise to this committee that, and it's well documented, the very high numbers of asylum seekers placed into hotel accommodation, which was in place to serve the Heathrow Airport, has been used and commissioned by the Home Office, and therefore we're seeing a disproportionately high number of homeless presentations coming to the council. And the council has made very clear that we are absolutely prepared to play our fair part in meeting the policy objectives of this country. We just want to be proportionately funded, and there isn't, the grant funding we receive does not meet the true cost of that demand. In addition, because of Heathrow Airport, we do have additional responsibilities which we are not fully funded for when UK nationals return to this country or exercise their right to move to this country. And we've seen that more recently with a spike in over the last 12 months or so, a spike in UK nationals taking up residence here, and we are only funded under some schemes for the first 10 days. And the reason I say that is because when a UK national arrives, they have to satisfy a residency test, and so there's a period where they can access no welfare benefits at all. And councils clearly have duties. We can't leave children destitute or homeless on the street. We have to step in and meet that housing cost and subsistence cost, and we do so, but we're not fully funded for those costs. So all of those contribute to that figure of 6.1.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you. My understanding was that when we offer accommodation to homeless people, even if they've become homeless through the hotels, the same criteria applies. So if they're single men, they won't be homed, or if, all the criteria that applies to any other people who are homeless is the same criteria is applied to them. So the pressures of them is just adding to the queue, or how does it add to the 6.1 million pressure is my, in terms of finances is what, I understand that they're outside, they're homeless, they're adding to the queue of homeless people, but we are not giving them any differential treatment, we're just treating them like any other homeless people, aren't we? And in terms of, you also mentioned that UK residents coming from now Chagos and other places, that we have to home them. But I think especially in the current context, it's important that that ambiguity is answered when we put these statements out. Thank you.
we can certainly provide further details in future updates, but I think just want to emphasise that it's the disproportionately higher impact, and you're absolutely right. Our policy or our policy and practice in applying legislation is entirely consistent. But what we do have to take into account that where there is an identified vulnerability or need, irrespective of whether it's a family with children or a single adult, we have to step in and provide assistance.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, I've made the comment on the presentation of budgets before. It's unfortunate that, it's fortunate that we are getting training, but it's unfortunate that our committee is getting training with everybody else tomorrow. So it's unfortunate that that's happening, which is why I'm going to ask some questions about the presentation, because also these are public documents and residents should be able to read them and understand them as well. So us getting training is great, but it needs to be understood and for residents to understand this. So looking at the presentation of, first of all, the 24-25 out-term position, can you, and also for the month 2 position, the headings. So, what is an approved budget and what is an underlying forecast? Why are they different? And also, why are we looking at month 10 when, if the year has passed, why is it not month 12? Month 2, presumably, is May, end of May. We're now in September. So why do we not have more recent data, and why are we going back to, why we're looking at particularly May, if it is month 2, if I've understood it correctly in terms of the financial year, rather than the municipal year? Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. If I take Table 2 and very briefly just go through the headings, the approved budget is effectively the budget that was set back in February at the start of the year, plus or minus any changes that have been agreed by Cabinet or other delegated bodies in the meantime. So sometimes you may get a grant that comes in after the budget was set, it will be adjusted, a service area moves from one area to another. That's why we report on an approved budget rather than the original budget. So the underlying forecast is the service area's best estimate of what they believe they will spend to the year end, or as far as we'd got in terms of closing the outturn position. So Table 2 is the outturn position. So it's saying against that budget, this is what we spent less income, standard sort of basic home sort of, as Margaret Thatcher would say, managing your budget. However, against that spend or income, money can be set aside for an earmarked reserve or taken out of a reserve. Think of it as a savings account that's been set aside at the end of a previous year because you've got specific schemes to complete. That's what earmarked reserves. Same with provisions. An earmarked reserve is where you voluntarily set money aside to complete something. A provision is an accounting adjustment where you know that you have a liability coming up, that you've got an obligation to pay. If it's not yet being delivered but you've got an obligation to pay, it's a provision. Transformation capitalisation, the government, I think it was back in about 2017, wanted to encourage councils to invest to make savings. It's a scheme known as the flexible use of capital receipts. Ordinarily, when you sell a building or another fixed asset, you can't use that money to support revenue. The government have relaxed the conditions and say, if it delivers an ongoing saving in the future or avoids costs becoming higher, you can use one-off capital receipts to invest to bring that down. You add the underlying forecast with the adjustments for monies taken in and out of earmarked reserves, provisions or transformation to arrive at the forecast outturn. That forecast outturn is the sum of the previous 4 columns. You then actually work out a variance, which is a difference between the approved budget and that adjusted forecast outturn, taking into account. That gives you a variance. We show what the variance was in the previous report prior to doing the draft outturn, and the final column shows how it's changed between the January reported position and that outturn position. Sorry, that was a quick run through the columns. You will get the training. It will be in a lot more detail, but it would take up a large part of this committee if I went through in detail. You asked a second part of the question.
It was to do with the periods.
Yep. So we've reported on period 2, which was the information that was actually presented to Cabinet, I believe, in July. The Council's normal policy is before we provide any other committee with an updated set of numbers, we need it to be fully validated by all the corporate directors, so they are saying they own their numbers. We also go through a challenge process, and we take that through the individual Cabinet members and collectively at Cabinet. So we've not produced the period 4 numbers. There wasn't a period 3 number because there wasn't a Cabinet in August, so we couldn't report to the August committee.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to have a supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. I recognise there's policy and procedure in that regard, but given we understand that the Council's finances are difficult, you're saying that you didn't produce any numbers for July and August.
We have produced numbers, but they haven't gone through that committee, that Cabinet process, or for the period 4 numbers, a sign-off by corporate management team.
So Cabinet will get those periods.
Yep.
So when we get to, when's our next meeting? We haven't got one next month, so it's November.
Yep.
We will be up to what period at that point?
You'll be
and will we see the trend over those months that we've missed?
We'll make sure that you see, just as in this report we showed you what the previous reported number was, period 10, we'll show the movements through the year.
Right, okay, I say it just makes it easier. Sorry, Chair, it's just, again, because these are public documents, we make sure that the public understands what they're looking at as well. Thank you.
Councillor Gohill?
Thank you, Chair. I guess going back to my question about the 1.4 million of savings that were carried forward, I just wanted to know if you've got any information, perhaps a percentage, on how many of those are structural savings versus sort of one-off interventions, and how confident are you that they'll actually be achieved this year?
We'll need to sort of do some analysis and come back to you in terms of the categorisation. And I think it's probably fair to say that we're more confident with some than others. And then if I just illustrate the point, and in some we're needing to take a very different approach. So if you look at, if I could ask the committee, say for example, to look at table 7 and line 2, develop a commercial trade waste service. There's basically an extra income target of 260k to win new commercial trade waste business. And so we've what's the practice, or what's actually been happening. We publish our charges, gets agreed in February, and then our competitors lower their prices or come up with a different offer that means that they retain their current business and we don't win that new business. So that's proved to be challenging. You can see it's rolled forward year after year. We've not been winning that new business. So we have to adopt a very different approach. We can't just carry on as we are, otherwise we'll never achieve that income target. So we're determined to find a way to win that new business and achieve that extra income. And we're coming up with options for Councillor Lavery to consider, which could include a flexible charging arrangement, it could include sort of a different marketing approach and so on, so that we can actually, in year, approach the businesses. Because we fix our prices and we try and run with them. Actually, we need a very different approach. So, that's just a one illustration of those that we've brought forward. But I think probably what's best for you, Chairman, is that we come back with a one-pager through the minutes, and we provide that for that further classification and an indication of which we'll achieve. Because although that one example I gave is 260 graded as red this year, we're not giving up on that. We're determined to find a way forward to win that business.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. That does bring me over to the question of just generally the red items, and a question, just a broader question around kind of alternative delivery method or contingencies if they are met. There wasn't enough detail in the report about that. I was just wondering if you or anyone actually could expand on it, should they, please?
I'll lead and I'll ask others to follow, but I think it is custom and practice that we as budget leads are accountable for our budgets, and it's said at many committees, and my finance colleagues will back me up, is that we don't have permission to overspend, and therefore we do look for mitigations and for alternatives in year within our budgets. The cost controls, reviewing recruitment, wherever we can, we will look for options to mitigate some of that pressure. So I know in some of the services that we've reviewed whether we need some of the vacant roles to be filled, and for some of them we've come up with different ways of working or different delivery options, and we've been able to bank the salaries from, say, a couple of vacant roles in a service area, and all of that contributes towards the bottom line position. So those mitigations will be reported in the bottom line monthly reporting position. But I don't know whether I put my colleagues on the spot, whether Julia or Gary have anything kind of maybe examples of sort of mitigations in year that you're taking to ensure a balanced position, not just within their own budgets, but to contribute to the council's bottom line position.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So my proposals are down in the sort of bottom half of Table 7. A lot of what we put forward are income uplifts, and that was linked to increasing our own fees and an increase in statutory fees. So because this is month 2 and the income accumulates across the year, when we were looking at the figures, we didn't have good enough data to kind of do a comprehensive forecast in month 2 because we were only sat there with 2 months worth of data. So our confidence kind of grows through the year as the income starts to come in, and we've done month 4 now, and I think I've got 16, 13, 300k. They've moved across into green. They're not delivered, but they're looking more confident. And then, as Dan says, we've got fast track planning service that the take-up hasn't quite been what we'd want, so we are looking at mitigating actions for that. So, and that might be that we've got extra income on a different area. So yeah, that's being managed in year for myself.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. And we're also looking at utilising our assets a lot more. Where we're trying to use the civic centre we've had the NHS have taken up one of our main floors. Again, we're looking at all sorts of other providers, making it a true hub for Hillingdon. And that's obviously work in progress. We have got quite a number of users of the building that we're moving from one part of the building to another to enable others to come into the building. So we're taking, as Dan mentioned, we're using every angle we possibly can to either reduce costs and increase income and stay within budgets.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to piggyback off Councillor Corr's question here, really. The report highlights that 6.1 million pressures from temporary accommodation, but it doesn't provide the service data. Could you confirm how many people are in temporary accommodation and what the cost is per day? If it's in there, I may have missed it, but...
So we've got about...
Is your microphone?
Oh, sorry, good point, yeah. Schoolboy error. We've got about, and it does change, we've got about 1,500 households who are in temporary accommodation, and we've taken a lot of action since April to reduce the unit cost of those individual temporary accommodations. So we've negotiated quite hard with landlords, but that net cost, and I say net cost because there is quite a lot of temporary accommodation that is requires zero subsidy from the council because of negotiations, or we're using our own stock. But the accommodation where we do need to subsidise, we are typically paying a position of about 50k a night.
And that, sorry, was that, just to confirm, that's for 1,500 families?
Yeah. Well, so a proportion of those will actually be zero subsidy, so it's actually on about 750 to 800 households where we're paying.
Jesus.
And that's relatively lower compared to other London boroughs.
Still high water.
It's still a lot of money, absolutely.
Yeah.
Councillor Davis, your follow-up?
Yes. What way should I go now? Let me go on this one. It shows in the report that community services showed a 0.4 million underspend for leisure and culture services. Can this be repeated, or was this just a one-off? Really intrigued in this one. So I know we use management agents for that as well, don't we? So.
Yeah, my understanding is, and we can provide the details to the committee, is that it was pretty much a one-off. It's not rather than a recurring.
Are we driving? Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, Chairman.
Thank you so much, Chair. Just now following up on what Councillor Davis said about 1,500 people on temporary accommodation, can you tell us how many of these are then the refugee homeless people who are accommodated in temporary accommodations?
It's in the order of, I'm going to say, about 10 to 15%, and it varies. But I don't want to, the figure changes, so I'd rather prefer to kind of come back to through the minutes with an exact figure.
Councillor Core?
Yeah, thank you. And you said that our spending 50k a night on 800 households is still lower than many other London boroughs? Is that correct?
It is, yeah. There are
despite the Heathrow pressures.
Some boroughs in inner London have real pressures for accommodation, but I think just to kind of stress is that our costs of supporting some groups are higher than other boroughs because of the disproportionate levels of placements in our borough.
Councillor Smallwood?
Thank you, Dan. Sort of in your estimate, if we've been funded fairly, how much money are we missing?
For asylum seeker households, that's about 5 million a year at this point in time, and that's across a whole range of services, mainly housing. But we are also looking at other more recent costs which we're incurring, which we're not being fully funded for, such as the arrival of new UK nationals. So that's in addition to the cost that we've previously reported.
Okay, so the budget would potentially look different if those numbers were just in there, just on the back of fairness, rather than any political point. Right, thank you, that's helpful. My next point is in Table 7, because I'm just trying to understand it, and maybe this is just not having the training first before it's there. It's to do with the fees and charges being in the red column at 411,000. Am I reading that as in we're not thinking we're going to take any fees and charges in? I'm just trying to understand why that's in the red column, and whether that's because we wait till the end of the year to do that. Maybe that's the answer, and I've answered the question myself, but I just want to understand, because I'm trying to just sort of work out how some of these reds can get into those left-hand columns and we can have a really positive story for the residents of Hillingdon.
So some of the real pressures in this table are related to the parking revenue account, and a whole range of initiatives with the very best of intentions were put forward, which includes a combination of things such as within the parking revenue account about reducing our operating costs by looking at, say, cashless payments or less cash payments, but it also includes some targets around increasing income through fees and charges. So, some of which are not achievable because of either lead-in times or consultations needed, or actually, when we looked at it in a lot more detail, it just wasn't possible to achieve. So, what we're actually undertaking now is a complete root and branch review within the parking revenue account. And those proposals will be presented to the corporate management team and Councillor Lavery in the development and preparations for the next MTFS. In other words, we don't want to continue having within our budget position income targets that are just not achievable, and so therefore we're looking to reset. And some of those may drop away or reduce or be phased over a longer period of time, but we need absolute clarity on those, and that's what we're looking to do.
Councillor Davis.
Sorry, I've lost my notes. Give me one moment. The budget included a £50,000 saving for increased income through film in the borough. How much of that's actually been achieved in this target, and what are we doing to grow the film industry? I know we've got Netflix in our borough already, which have been recording. What else are we doing to drive that in? Have we approached Pinewood? Have we approached other film studios, etc.?
Is that, just a point of clarity, Councillor, is that in resident services?
Yeah, I believe so. Unless I've read it wrong.
It might be the corporate services one.
Maybe. Okay.
It was listed in table 7, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's in table 7.
I'm subbing for that.
I did see the estimate, as you say, 50,000, I believe it was.
Yeah, I believe it's in table 7.
Oh, where's Wally, this, isn't it?
It's table 3.
Oh, sorry, table 3.
It's
It will look the same afterwards.
the second to the bottom of community and environment.
Yeah. Well done, Councillor, go here.
So fully achieved 50k, and this is why I said that this used to be under me, but it's kind of part of the changes that moved now. But I know that Emma Gilbertson and the comms team is actively working with those in the film industry through a company who has very good connections, and so we're looking to make best use of all of our assets and locations in the borough and really promote the borough as a place where we want filming companies to come in. And actually, it's good to promote the borough, but it's also good for income too.
Thank you.
No follow-up?
No.
Okay, Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to ask about the income that's at risk. So on page 18, it talks about, I think it's been mentioned as well, but I want to dig a bit deeper if possible, alternative delivery methods. And you've mentioned that, again, this is difficult because we're looking at old data, so the numbers aren't up to date, which is a little bit, again, unfortunate. But there's comment on page 17 about less than expected income from pay and display machines and other additional services needed in community safety. So you mentioned there's a review, so that review will be based on the most accurate information that we've got, being month 4, I think you said. How long is that review going to take? Or how far along is it, I suppose, if it's already underway? And what other things beyond the parking fees are you exploring?
So the review will complete and conclude in time for the development of new budget, the new budget proposals that will be presented to Cabinet in December. So I'm looking at somewhere between 8 weeks away, 10 weeks away before it will be finalised, but it will be a very analytical exercise across the different parts of the borough, and I wouldn't want to, I suppose, determine what the outcome of such a review would be, and there will be a whole range of options that will be available, which will help to either compensate or conclude that some of these targets are just not achievable within the timescales that we have available, or there are different options available. But it will be effectively an options list based on a solid intelligence and market understanding.
Councillor Barney.
Thank you, Chair. And is there any understanding at this stage of the reasons why some of these, I mean, we're saying we've got less, just taking the parking thing as an example, because it's been highlighted, but other incomes that are not as desired or expected as part of the budget. Have we got any sort of early indications as to reasons why these incomes are not coming in? Is it, why aren't people going into our town centres and using our parking spaces and so forth? Have we got any early indications of things like that?
I mean, I think with parking, we really just need to go right back to basics and do this sort of root and branch analysis, and that will give us the confidence about the way forward. Richard's team are developing a parking strategy, but we need to make sure that it totally aligns with the council's corporate plan and direction of travel. And so I wouldn't want to sort of get into too much detail at this point, because we haven't concluded the review at this stage. But certainly we'll have a much clearer way forward and clearer understanding once the review's concluded.
Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not undermining the pressures on our resources, but I just wanted to make sure that we are housing refugees and not asylum seekers, because asylum seekers, my understanding, are housed by the Home Office, and we only offer accommodation to the refugees. Is that correct?
Yeah, so just for everyone's, the committee's benefit, so the Home Office have responsibilities, duties to provide accommodation to those who are seeking asylum, and once the asylum claim is determined, then they discharge their responsibilities to the local authority. Yes.
Thank you very much, and it would be then interesting, and I think it will be prudent then, we, especially as representatives, don't use that language and expressions loosely when we are mentioning to pressure on resources, because I think what we say makes a lot of difference. Coming to the second, which is a different question, I'll park this for now, and with assurances from you that there will be no ambiguous expressions anymore. It says transformation resources have been applied to improving services in waste, libraries, museums, homelessness prevention. So transformation resources, how has it been applied in waste? Because what we see in our role as councillors, there doesn't seem to be any tangible improvement in terms of waste or waste services. In fact, it seems to be going down, considering the kind of casework we pick up every day.
Okay, so the transformation that's referred to is money that's being used to support the delivery of the savings. So this one actually refers to introducing the garden waste saving. So it's transformation money that's been used to purchase the tags, delivery of the tags, and comms inside the cabs that allow the drivers to know who's paid for their sacks. So it's actually funding that's being used to deliver the current saving that's in there.
Okay, any other members wishing to ask a question before I close the item? I can see none. Okay, in which case I'll refer you again to the pack, and we are advised as the committee to note the 24-25 outturn position and to note the 25-26 month 2 budget monitoring positions as per the recommendations on 25. Is that noted? Thank you. Thank you again to the officers for your attendance this evening and your presentation. So please, if you wish to leave, you're free to do so. We won't be far behind you, hopefully. So we will go on now to item 8, which is the proposed review of footway parking in priority areas, phase 1, pages 41 to 62. Liz, would you like to introduce this? Your name was on the list. So.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so as you can see from what's proposed, we're thinking of looking at this review of footway parking in the borough. This is something that Councillor Bridges and Councillor Farley have agreed to in principle offline. Clearly the list of roads is extremely long. It would not be feasible to look at the whole list. So the proposal is to look at a small number of roads, those where there are specific issues that have been reported maybe by residents or that ward councillors are aware of, and just to focus on say 20 roads at this point, where there is a particular issue that we're already aware of, or officers are aware of. And obviously ward councillors are also invited to suggest any ideas of any specific roads from that list that they feel are a priority area. So that's the proposal, is to look at that as our next review, being mindful of the fact that we only have a set amount of time if we want to complete this in the municipal year before before April next year. So that's the proposal, and we'd welcome thoughts really if anyone has anything to add.
Thank you, Liz. Just to add to that, really, as Liz has said, we are looking at a small number as a phase 1 approach, but also our determination to look at that list of suspended roads, which have been, as you've seen from that report, have been in suspension for decades, some as far back as the 80s. And what we've seen on this list is, the status next to it saying pending review is sort of a bit of an insult, really. If you've left it on that list for a good 30, 40 years, it can't go on like that. And I think these roads do need reviewing where possible. And this list that we've proposed, or we're going to look into, focuses primarily on prime areas such as shopping parades and other sort of areas, as Dan's mentioned, in areas where we need economic growth. It'd be good to look at those roads to make sure that we're getting those best schemes in place wherever possible. Just to comment on the other suggestions that were made, very good suggestions, by the way. We did look at the fun fairs. I think the report did mention this, but it's being looked at internally, so that was parked as a result. And I have spoke with Liz in regards to the other items. Although we felt we couldn't prioritise them at this stage, they have been added to the work programme as information items, so they will be looked at by this committee, just in another form of scrutiny. Comments, Councillor Gohill?
Thanks, Chair. Just a request, if we're whittling it down to about 20 roads or so, could we, well, there are two suggestions here. One is that we either do a split of 10-10 north and south of the A40, or depending on the number of wards that we have, at least one per ward, and then the rest can be done according to, I don't know, density or how many roads are in that area. If there's more than one, it needs to be looked at. But I think we need a fair spread of this across the borough to get a good idea, if we can, please.
No, I agree. I may have to relook at the list as well, because there may be a case that there's probably more roads in the south that have been suspended than those in the north, but we can balance it out, as you rightly say, and particularly in those areas with shopping parades as well. Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, one is the time frame, so how because we've got, based on this, I think a witness session will be in the next meeting. I think we've got, it was proposed, I think I did see, from where I saw it, but there was talk of a site visit, or page 34, so that's in December. So I'm just conscious of how we whittle them down in terms of who we speak to or what it is, but I'm also conscious of certain areas of the borough, and we've all got them in our different wards, where these are set up because of estates that were built in a different era, which can't really accommodate on-street parking, and that's why you have these things. So yes, I think formalising them, certainly, making sure that it's understood what is a legitimate on the pavement parking and so forth. But what I would like to get is some lead on how we whittled them down and an agreement on that. So we've got October with no meeting. So it's just really how we, I agree, how we whittle these down to dealing with certain areas and being conscious of, again, areas in our wards where these exist because of the era in which those estates were built.
If I could add some sort of contribution, I spoke with Liz outside of the meeting about this. My only concern is if you prioritise roads, you may well end up with 10 cul-de-sacs when actually there's a very long road in the south or in the north outside a school, for example, which has been suspended, may get missed off as a result of having to be equal in both areas. So I think it needs a sensible approach to it. One suggestion I made was to actually compare the map to our gritting teams, for example, because they grit priority routes, and maybe to mirror that and see where the priority roads lie in that map, just as an example, if we're trying to find specific areas. But yeah, I agree, we need to keep the list of roads precise, but I think there needs to be a focus on the length of them and the... Sorry, Councillor Cool.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I think in July 2024, not too long ago, in Property, Highways and Transport, we did have a school safety review around transport, and we did have presentations from school and from residents near school about people parking on the pavements and stuff like that. If you have a look at it and make sure that there's no crossing, or we can use something from there, it could save our time. Thank you.
If we could reach out to the relevant officers outside the meeting in highways and waste services, maybe education as well, just to see if they've got a suggested list as well, which we can compare with, and before we go out to councillors asking for their contributions. Any other comments? In which case, are we happy to note that and move on with it? Okay. The forward plan, pages 63 to 80. Is that noted, Councillor Farley? No, if we got one. Use your microphone, Councillor Farley.
Item 9, aren't we? Sorry. Also looking at the vote listing. I just want a couple of items. So on page 55, because there was no cabinet meeting in August, the review of the out-of-hours service. I was wondering if there's any update that can be shared with the committee on that one. And on page 63, the HMO consultation. So that's a new item we've got on there. Have we got details of any consideration? It's going to cabinet in terms of a report to consider any consultations. Do we have any details on if and when consultations will start ahead of that? Because given that this was passed at council over a year ago, we had an update at council, I think in July. But I'm just conscious of this. This is going to be February before this goes to cabinet, and then however long it then decides, whatever decisions come to at that point. It just seems to be extending quite a long time, and I just want to make sure that we understand what is happening on that process. Thank you.
Liz, did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So I've noted both of those. I'll look into those and feedback to you if that's okay. Thank you.
So agreed. Thank you. And I believe that is... Oh no, work programme, sorry, pages 81 to 84. Yeah, of course.
Yes, so if I could just mention, while we're talking about the work programme, just to remind councillors that we have the training tomorrow. I know it's come up already earlier this evening, but we do have the financial scrutiny training tomorrow, which is now online due to the tube strike. So I'm hoping that you are all aware of it and planning to attend tomorrow evening. That's all, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? In which case we'll note that as well. And that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for your attendance. I look forward to seeing you at the training tomorrow. And I believe that's it for tonight. So thank you very much and good night.